Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social podcast. Today we'll be discussing the third round of the Superprestige in Merksplas, and with me here to do that, as all season, is Issam. Thank you for being here again, Issam.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Today maybe not the most interesting races in terms of combat action, but still quite some things to talk about, and we'll start off by talking about the men's race where Cyclocross World Champion Tom Pidcock started his season. Unlike last year, he could start on the first row, and he had a decent start. He went into the field around the 8th position. It was Gavin Kuhn who had the fastest start, but he was quickly overtaken by Sweeck. Sweeck was definitely on a mission today as he led throughout the first lap together with Niels van der Putten. We had a very good start for Stan Gaudry, but Stan Gaudry is simply not the fastest rider overall. He was basically a mobile chicane throughout the forest section and significantly held up the rest. So that meant that Sweeck and Van der Putten were able to open a gap. Issam, the first one to pass Gaudry, was able to bridge that gap, so we had a situation with 3 leaders. They had already at the end of the first lap a gap of almost 20 seconds on Van der Haar, who had had a relatively poor start, Michael van Toerenhout and Tom Pidcock. Sweeck in that second lap, he didn't even attack, he just simply was quicker back on his bike on top of a hill, stretched out a small gap, put out more power on the straight, dropped Van der Putten and Issam, and from there on he was gone and never to be seen again. He cruised basically towards victory, keeping his gap over Lars van Haar stable at almost 15 seconds throughout the entire race. Van der Haar in the final lap came a bit closer, but ultimately it wasn't to be. Sweeck took his 3rd win in a row and his 4th win of the season in Merksplas ahead of Lars van der Haar. Behind that, the Pauwels Sauzen duo of Van Toerenhout and Issam were fighting it out for the 3rd place. Issam looked to be the favourite. He opened the gap in the penultimate lap, but ultimately got caught and then got passed by Van Toerenhout. So the European champion claimed 3rd spot, with Issam needing to settle for 4th. Issam, I don't really know where to begin here because we've praised Sweeck the entire season already. We obviously know his form is good. Today's course is good for him. And well, besides that the course is good for him, this Sweeck, there are only a handful of courses that he can't compete for the win. Koppenberg, Namur, we already had both of them. And then maybe Gaveren, and that's on Boxing Day. So in this Sweeck, it's hard to do something against it. Van der Haar, in terms of form, is relatively on the same level, I would say, but yeah, he messed up his start, and then he said, well, I hoped Sweeck would make a mistake. I was hoping it the entire race because I was so close and could keep the gap stable, but this Sweeck doesn't make any mistakes.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, Sweeck was from the start of the race spot on. He was there, and yeah, he was a man with a mission, and he wanted to win this race quite badly, and already 4 wins this season, and not the exact crosses or something like that. I mean, 2 Superprestige, 2 World Cup. I mean, that's significant, and like you said, we already have praised him quite a lot over the season, but there is reason to do so because he keeps on getting the W, he keeps on getting those results in, and he has been going well over the course of the season so far. So I think that that you have to praise him for what he's doing so far, and especially for today as well. And Van der Haar definitely was thereabout in terms of performance. I think that they were quite equal over the course of the race, but just the sand was definitely an issue for Van der Haar, and also in the technical sections, Sweeck was just a little bit more spot on, I think, compared to Van der Haar. But overall, I think they were quite equal, and the gap was made in the first part of the race, and for Van der Haar especially, he had to come all the way from I think 6th, 7th place, go through all the guys in front of him. On a parcours like this, it's very difficult to gain positions and make up your places, and I think that Van der Haar learned that the hard way, that this race it's crucial to be at the front from the start, and he wasn't. And he made sure that he got the maximum result out of it for him, I would say, and that was 2nd place in this race.
It's interesting you mentioned that you think Van der Haar was losing a lot of time in the sand because yes, Sweeck is a very good sand rider and it definitely looked more smooth, but I didn't have the impression that Van der Haar was actually losing time in the sand, or at least not a significant amount of time. Maybe a second, but not more than that. Van der Haar is also a very good sand rider, but his style is very different. It looks like he's working more, whereas Sweeck just sends it in and then lets the bike do the work. So where does Van der Haar lose the race? You already say it. At the start he was 20 seconds down, comes back to 15, and then if you roughly have the same strength and the same good and bad points on the course, you're not going to close that unless somebody makes a mistake. And this Sweeck is just on fire. The new environment certainly seems to be working for him. And I remember at the beginning of the season when we were at the team presentation, he said, yeah, I want to win 10 crosses this season. And we both were thinking, 10 crosses, yeah, probably 10 crosses in the exact series and then some races where nobody is after the World Championships. But he's delivering, certainly above expectations at the beginning of the season. And he will definitely ride on this form. Tomorrow we go to Overijse, normally a course that doesn't suit him. I still don't think he will win, but against this Sweeck, I would not be comfortable riding against him, even if you are on a course like Overijse.
Well, definitely not. I think that the form is there, and even if the race is a race that you that doesn't really suit you, if you have the form, if you're in a very good shape, unlike somebody like Iserbeet today, I think then even if it's not really a course that suits you well, you still perform better than you normally would. And he's in a flow right now. Everything is going well for him. You could see it after the race with the post interview. Like, he was smiling. He has his child there as well, and he's enjoying the races right now. He's in a flow. You're winning races, and that can really motivate you to give it your all in every race. And sometimes you can just find that little extra that can help you out. And I wouldn't count him off for tomorrow. I think that it will be difficult for him, but for the podium, I definitely think he is one of the guys that will fight for that for sure.
Yeah, he's definitely in a good flow, and I read an interview this week with his mom, I think it was in Het Nieuwsblad, where she was talking about some changes Sweeck made. Sweeck now owns an apartment in Mallorca, and his mom said that he goes there regularly to do midweek training. So fly there on Monday and fly back on Friday, do training there. It's pretty easy to do. It's only a 2-hour flight. It's super cheap to fly with Ryanair from Charleroi. And if you have an apartment there with a bike and all your clothes there, you don't even lose a training day. It's relatively easy to do, and it adds to the situation that he bought a new house in Belgium as well. He lives in his street with his parents, so he can drop off his 2 children there. And that all makes it a bit easier for him, and that's what he said, or his mom said, made the difference for Laurens, and that is why this pace is a lot stronger. So it's definitely interesting that he's one of the riders that has gone from I hate travel, World Cup, too much travel, Tabor, too far away, long transfer, to oh wait, I can actually go to Spain for multiple times a week. So I don't think we should consider the training he does there as a real training camp, but it's definitely an improvement compared to training in the dark and cold months here in the Benelux.
That would definitely help. And in the interview, he was very relaxed. He was already looking forward to the grapes of tomorrow. Today it were the strawberries, tomorrow the grapes in Overijse. He looks, like you said, he looks in a very good place, and that's definitely what you need as an athlete. You need to definitely be in a place where you feel good, not only physically, but also your mental state is very important. And I think that he found the right balance right now, and it's going very well for him. So that's what we love to see, obviously.
If we look at a couple of other riders that were in contention for the podium, we basically come to a treat end of Pauwels Sauzen riders, although realistically Van Toerenhout and Iserbeet were the only 2 really fighting for the podium. Ryan Kamp at some point came close after a relatively poor start, but then as soon as he was almost about to rejoin them, he had to hop off his bike in the sand pit. It was a pretty serious sand pit today, so he needed to settle for 5th, which is still a very good result for him. Finally, things are apparently going his way. Struggled a bit, but good to see him back. But back to the fight for the podium. Van Toerenhout against Iserbeet. There had been a lot of talks that Van Toerenhout should have let Iserbeet take the third place because of the Superprestige classification. What's your thought on that?
Depends on what they had discussed before the race. It might have been that Iserbyt, said that he didn't feel great, and that he's struggling a little bit, and that he doesn't feel very good. But if Iserbyt really does have the intention to complete the whole Superprestige, and the Superprestige is his goal, at the moment I think that he is looking a little bit better in the classification than Van Toerenhout, then you could argue about that, but it's in the end it's for a spot on the podium. It's still a bit too early to already play these tactics or let the one guy wait for the other and give this position to this guy. It's maybe a little bit too early. I mean, Iserbyt is at the moment just not really at his best. That's visible. Van Toerenhout on a good day right now felt quite good, and I think that he in the last lap, you cannot wait for Iserbyt and give him that position, especially if you have the legs to beat him in the end. So I think that he made just the right decision, and I wouldn't have waited, and he did the same. So I think that it's in my eyes it's the correct way what he did. And yeah, the team tactics, they can wait for the last two races when the classification is a little bit more settled.
I agree. It's too early for that. Van Toerenhout is now only 2 points behind Iserbyt in the classification. Iserbyt himself is not on the best form. I think that last weekend he definitely was unlucky in Niel with the crash, and then in Beekse Bergen also with the start. But he's definitely not in the best place. It looks like he's struggling mentally a bit as well, and the form is not as good as it was before. His injury is playing up again, and well, it's just not ideal for him. So why would you gamble on Iserbyt now? Yes, Superprestige is super close. Every point counts. But the same goes the other way. At the moment, Sweeck is on fire and he is looking lively. He is leading by 3 points. But you don't know if he can hold this form for the rest of the season. Who knows what happens when we come towards the end of the season. We're going to Middelkerke. We're going to Gullegem, Diegem, Zolder, Boom. Boom might be a cross where Sweeck struggles, especially if it's muddy. Who knows, maybe Van Toerenhout wins there, and then Van Toerenhout can be in contention again. So it's too early to do this, because that 1 point that might come and bite Iserbyt at the end could equally be a point that could come and bite Van Toerenhout in the end, where they say, oh, in the third race we pulled the team tactics, and now in the 8th race Van Toerenhout is our guy that can still win, and he loses by 1 point, which we could have had if we didn't play the team tactics. Van Toerenhout at the moment is simply the best rider on the Pauwels Sauzen team. I'm expecting quite something from him tomorrow. Today was not a course for him. He rode a pretty decent race. For him, the same went as for Van der Haar. Bad opening lap, but what played more part for Van Toerenhout was also that this course was too technical for him. And that ultimately cost him, or well, it didn't cost him. It just meant that he just wasn't good enough today. Technically, Van der Haar and Sweeck were just better. And I think also in terms of power, they were better. But on the other hand, there's an argument to make that Van Toerenhout was racing with tomorrow in the back of his head, but we didn't really hear anything about that, so who knows. Let's look at our entire top 10 then. Sweeck taking the win ahead of Van der Haar, Van Toerenhout and Iserbyt. Rijnkamp was in 5th, we already briefly went over his race. 6th place was for Niels van der Putten ahead of Tom Pidcock, Felipe Orts and Kevin Kuhn, whilst the 10th place went to local home hero Jens Adams. Let's start and talk about Niels van der Putten. Van der Putten at the end of the race still overtook Tom Pidcock, who we'll talk about in a bit. What do you think about the race of Niels van der Putten, Issam?
Well, I was seeing him in the first lap, and I was a bit afraid that he would completely crack down in the race, because it was quite a fast pace that he was trying to hold in the opening of the race, and he kind of paid the price for it halfway through. But as Van der Putten does best in the last couple of laps, he finds something back, and even able to then in the end overtake Pidcock, who was running in 6th. And I think that overall, I think his race was definitely good. Him and Kamp definitely had a very good race, but it's also a parcours where the power is a little bit limited. The straights are not really there, so you can really lean a little bit more on your technical side, and there is also some places where I wouldn't say you can recover, but you don't really have to be on maximum heart rates and really pushing yourself. So I think that he benefited a little bit from that, from the Put, as we know, technical rider, knows how to go through a corner, and that helped him, I guess, in the race in the end. And that's with a good form, then you're able to finish in the top 10, and I think for him that's one of those good results, I guess.
I think all the riders here know how to go through a corner, but some know how to do it faster than others. And Van der Putte today, as you say, it was a course that kind of benefited him, although he is a very all-round rider. He can do almost everything. So I'm not too surprised to see him do well today. He's definitely a bit above where we see him usually, but he's definitely growing into this rider that is always in the top 10. And the question is, can he, because he's still young, next year as second year elite, make another step and then potentially challenge occasionally with the front runners, the likes of Sweeck, Van der Haar and Van Toerenhout? I do think it's in him. It's just a matter of time before it comes out. If we go back to the topic of cornering, then we immediately come to the rider behind him. Tom Pidcock started his cross season here for the third year in a row. He starts the season with a 7th place. In the preview podcast, I had expected much more from him, but that was based on a different image of the course. I remember last year's course, it was pretty fast. It had a lot of straights. And then I thought, okay, well, it's going to be rainy, but it's not going to get too muddy, so Pidcock should have the advantage of having the good form. I think the part of the good form held today. He said it himself in the interview, my form was good, and it looked to be good. On the straights, he had the power. That was good enough. But it was, as usual, the technical part that wasn't good enough. And that technical aspect, there was a lot more of that in the course this year. All these long straights that there were last year, they had taken them out. They had replaced them, broken them up with corners, added some man-made hills, another corner there, some weird jump in it. So that really changed everything. And that's where Pidcock was definitely struggling. We could see it every lap in the sand. His sand passage, it's already not a strength of him. And today it was just a lot worse. He lost 4 or 5 seconds there almost every lap, needed to get it off sometimes when others were riding. Then he's able to get through, but he's just putting out raw watts to get through instead of flying through like Sweeck did. That's definitely what cost him a lot of time, and then the technical sections equally. He lost the connection with the group almost every lap there, and then on the power sections he needed to close it, and that's something you cannot keep doing. Then he was still in contention for 5th, crashed, and from there on I think he wasn't really too bothered anymore, and didn't seem too bothered with Van der Putte ending ahead of him, but overall, not bad based on the course.
Definitely not bad. I mean, his first race back, if you look at the preparation that he has been doing, I think he was off the bike for a couple of weeks, I think, and then trying to get back on the bike is always a struggle, and I think the form is there. Even after the race, he looked quite good. When he crossed the line, he looked quite good, and you could really see that it wasn't, he lost quite some time in the corners. Technically, he struggles, not technically in a way, but just the way he was, you just have these days that you don't feel connected with your bike, and I think that was a bit going on with Pidcock. Give him a couple of races and you will see him go a little bit different through the corners. When you train, you don't have this pressure of the race, and I think right now when you're in a race, you have to do everything just a little bit faster and a little bit more consistent in that as well. And I think that he kind of lacked that. And I think tomorrow already, when we go to a race where you can use your engine a little bit more, I think for Pidcock it will be a better day than it was today.
Yeah, and that not having the connection with the bike is just a direct result of being off the cross bike for so long. He said he didn't do too much cross-specific training before he got into this race, and that showed. It's the same as every year. He's struggling to get into a rhythm, and once he settles in, he reaches a decent level. So tomorrow already, Overijssel, which is a less technical course, more on the power, I already see him do better there. And he said he thought he needed 3 weeks to get to his maximum achievable level, or well, not in terms of form, but really get the feel with his cross bike. So yeah, I think we just need to wait, and I think, as I already said, don't want to repeat myself too much, on this course, the conditions there were today with a bit of mud, it's definitely not bad. I think for the rest in the top 10, there was not too much. I mean, it's nice to see Orts and Kuhn in there again, but they're almost becoming usual suspects in the top 10, which was definitely not what we expected before the season. They definitely made a step again this year, but we don't need to go over them every week. But still, cool to see them in the top 10, a Spanish and a Swiss rider that are making steps and ways into becoming solid top 10 riders, which is very nice to see. Let's go and talk about the women's race then. In the women's race, we had the fastest start for Marianne Vos, the world champion, was off to a flyer, but already halfway through the lap got overtaken by Alvarado. Vos had some problems re-clipping into her pedal, and that was a sign for Alvarado to keep pushing. She overtook Vos and opened a gap, and from there on, Alvarado was gone. She was never seen again by the opposition. She kept the gap at 16 seconds, and eventually started extending in a bit to 20 and then held back in the final lap. She took her second win of the season and is now the leader in the Superprestige. Behind we had the two competitors in the Superprestige classification fight it out for the remaining podium places. Betsema and Van der Heijden overtook Vos, dropped the rest of the group that was in their wheel, and then were, coherently working together somewhat in the chase of Alvarado, although it didn't matter too much on the course today. And then after that, in the penultimate lap, Betsema went in for a bike change. Van der Heijden opened the gap, but then Betsema on the fresh bike was able to re-overtake Van der Heijden and settle for second, with Van der Heijden claiming another third spot in the Superprestige. Alvarado taking the win today, absolutely flawless ride on a course that is very good for her with the technical sections, small hills, some stairs. It just looked all so smooth for her. Perfect ride by her today.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was key for her to start well, and she did, and she had a perfect lead out by Vos, the world champion, pulling her in that first lap, and even in that first lap she was able to get around, and yeah, then it was 5, 10, 15 seconds, and she held that that gap quite well and didn't make that many mistakes, went through it good, and then you are the deserved winner. And I think for her it is, you can see that the confidence is definitely building. It's definitely not a lack of confidence, but when you have these races where you miss one or two, it's good that you then can take the advantage of that and just get the win. And I think for her it's very important because of the classification as well, where she's doing well. She's now tied with Betsema, so I think overall for her, great business, and it looked good the way she was riding around the Merksplas.
I don't really want to say that Alvarado is now well and truly back, because she was never really gone. Her last season was definitely a bit below her own expectations, and sure, it was not great, but come on, she almost ended on the podium at Worlds, had a couple of podiums, was in contention for the win in Baal. It was always clear that the talent was still there, and we all know that she was sick and that really affected her, and that she's now well and truly at her best level of fitness, and that means that she's able to compete for wins here. And here in Merksplas, it's just looking good. The only question I have is maybe for you, Issam, do you think that maybe Alvarado is racing too much? Because her schedule is pretty loaded. She's doing Superprestige and some exact crosses. She's doing the World Cup. Meanwhile, we see that the likes of Pietersen, Van Empel, yes, they are younger, but they are only doing the World Cup. So do you think that that's a very wise decision, and that maybe the cross calendar as we know it, where some riders do 30, 40 crosses a season, is maybe not the best approach, and that the fact that some riders, for instance also Betsema, are doing that might come back to bite them at the end of the season, towards the Christmas period, Worlds, or after that?
It can definitely play a role. I think tomorrow it will play some sort of a factor for the guys, both women and men that have been racing in Merksplas. It will definitely, you will definitely feel in the legs in Overijse, but I feel that it's still a bit too early in the season right now that those efforts will count that much. I think that's, like you said, the Christmas period, you will see it, and as a rider, you just need to make sure that you make the right adjustments the moment you feel not so well, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense to race three races in a week. then you might have to skip one or two, and you have to work up to the goals that you have. And I don't know what Alvarado had in terms of goals in the beginning of the season. Were it more the championships, or was he more looking into a good placement in the classifications? And I think, you plan a season well ahead. So I think that she knows what she's doing. She has the professionals around her, but it will definitely play a factor later on in the season. What those under 23 are doing right now, definitely the likes of Van Empel and Pietersen, that they are choosing their races and they are a bit more conservative with their energy, and that will always be a benefit at the end of the season. But the question will be how much of a benefit it will be.
I don't think it will, as you say, have an influence at the moment, but it is very interesting going forward, because we discussed this some weeks ago. Is the Superprestige losing value? On the women's side, yes. On the men's side, everybody is doing it. But overall, if we look at the scientific data, women need a bit more recovery than men as well. So you could arguably say that it's a logical scientific result that the women are the first to prioritize the World Cup, as that is the most important, and that therefore Superprestige and X2O are losing in terms of depth of the field. I don't think that it will mean the end for the series. I think that with how big the World Cup has become, we won't see the women do all three this series. We can already see that Alvarado has made this choice, Superprestige with World Cup. Van Empel is leaning towards World Cup X2O. Pietersen is only in the World Cup. Van Anrooy does a bit of everything, but is looking to lean towards X2O and World Cup as well. So that could keep it in balance, but really make the World Cup the biggest thing there is, because everybody will choose the World Cup. So it will be interesting to see if these younger riders that are coming through the ranks now, Backstedt, she's doing multiple classifications. It will be interesting to see if they also start prioritizing the World Cup and then only do the World Cup, or if they will combine it and that this is only a thing that Pietersen and Van Empel prefer, because we do know that there are examples of riders who do prefer 2 races per weekend, and they are normally better on the second day of racing. So it will be interesting, and I wonder what the future of the Superprestige and X2O will be generally, but also just on the women's side, because that looks to be developing towards the Flanders Classics ideal a bit more quickly than the men's side. Then the second place, Betsema, she ended 18 seconds behind Alvarado. She had a bit of a bad start, but I don't think that it mattered too much today. Alvarado looked to be a bit better. Betsema could have been a bit closer, but I don't think she could have beaten Alvarado. A decent race by her today. However, there's been a video of her in the first lap handing out a significant push to Honsinger, and I mean, maybe I need to take a bit of blame for this, because I've always said that Betsema needs to become a bit less nice and gain a bit of killer instinct to finish off races a bit more often. But this was, in my opinion at least, over the line. There was no reason for her to hand out a significant push like this in the first lap against Honsinger. The video is on our Twitter for the people interested.
This is definitely not something what you should do in a race, and it's actually a serious matter in a way. I mean, it's we had discussed it already with Iserbeat in Neil, where you could make an argument that it was in a way balance holding, and especially on such a hill, it's difficult to hold your balance in a way, and you could make the argument about it, but today it was you couldn't really do it. It was a clear push, a forward push, and that's just something that you shouldn't be doing in a race. And in the first lap, these things happen. It's not a secret or something that there are some pushing left and right, but it was also a bit unnecessary in a way. It's the first lap. Sure, you had a passage through the mud there, and Honsinger was able to get ahead, but yeah, you shouldn't be trying to have physical contact in such a way, in my opinion. But like I said, it's the first lap. Maybe you feel like you. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what. Yeah, I guess just something snapped, and she did that, and I don't think it's really something that she does a lot. We haven't seen it from her at all, actually. So let's hope it's the last time.
Yeah, it's weird because Betsema is normally the rider who gets bullied around in groups. I remember last year in the Tower World Cup, 5 riders go into the last lap. Betsema is in 5th wheel, not because she doesn't try, just because as soon as it's a bit sketchy going into a corner, that she's the first one to back out. And now it looks that Honsinger is riding into her path, and probably she was like, hey, what's going on here? Why are you still on your bike? Everyone else is running. I'm going to hand out a push. It's weird that in the interview after the race, there was like nothing about it. And she said, well, yeah, it was muddy and I had a bad start. So they didn't even ask about it. I don't know if it was even noticed by the people in charge of the broadcast because there was no replay. But it's definitely clear that Honsinger is still riding there and therefore is forced to go a bit wider and then receives a push from Betsema. It's no Formula 1 where you need to leave space for other people and aren't allowed to cut off other people. So, yeah, Betsema definitely shouldn't have handed out that push, and I didn't expect this from her. So I think it, as you said, must have been some incident, something snapped, or just, I don't know. I don't really know if there's an explanation for it. I don't know if there needs to be an explanation, but it's definitely a lot more than the normal first lap contact, because it's normally a bit of shoulders out, sometimes a small hand like, hey, I'm here, rather than this is a proper push, and if we're going to start allowing these things, it could become a free-for-all in the middle for the pack, and that's not what we should have wanted. If we once again turn ourselves to the rule book got altered this year. You might remember this part from the Fayetteville podcast, and the rules that have been included state the following. Any act of violence among riders or any other person results in a disqualification and a 200 franc fine. Any obstruction by a rider in order to prevent or delay the movement of another rider results in a disqualification and a 100 franc fine. I would say that this incident falls under both, as a push is a clear act of violence and it is also an obstruction by a rider in order to prevent the delay of the movement of the other rider. But then again, this is such a vague indication that commissars, even if they see, like, do you put this under it? Where is the previous standard? It wasn't upheld here, it wasn't upheld there, so that can become a bit complicated. So, well, let's not look into it too much. Let's just hope it doesn't happen again. Let's look at our entire top 10 then. Alvarado with the win ahead of Betsema and a consistent ride by Inge van der Heijden in third. 4th place for Lucinda Brandt ahead of Zoe Backstedt and Manon Bakker. 7th for Aniek van Alphen ahead of Ribeiro and Honsinger, who received the push. And then 10th place for Marianne Vos, who blew up spectacularly. Let's start with talking about Lucinda Brandt. She got stuck in the mud on the first lap, twice, and then still rode a pretty good recovery race ending 4th, not too far off the podium. Signs of improvements on her side?
Improvements for sure, and it looks better week after week. I think that you could definitely see that, there was a basis, but she just, kind of has to get in a rhythm. The start was not great, but that didn't really have to do anything with her form or whatsoever. She got stuck in the mud a little bit and had to fight her way a little bit back to the front. But I think that overall the race was positive, and on a course definitely where you're not able to completely utilize the engine, like I said, it's definitely a good result from her side. And I think that if I would have a guess, around 3-4 weeks we are going to see a Brandt that will be able to fight for victory again, I think.
Yeah, definitely was not bad on her end. I think she would have loved to be a bit better, but with that first lap incident she needed to fight her way through the field, so eventually 4th. Could have been 3rd, but, well, signs of improvement. That was better than in Beekse also a better course with a bit more power, a lot less bumpy, so I think she can be happy, and the same goes for the 2 riders behind her. Let's start with Zoe Backstedt, 5th place, season best result for her. In terms of high-level performances, I think she was a bit higher in Ardooien, but, well, the competition there was a lot less, and yeah, I think she can be happy with this result. Don't necessarily know if this is the perfect course for her, but her form seems to be improving week in, week out, and that kind of fits what we've heard around EF Education. They are apparently planning their form into the Christmas period, and then to build up on that towards the World Championships, which are going to be held in the first weekend of February. So yeah, 5th place now is definitely a sign of that training progression going the right way.
Definitely, and she had someone to follow quite well in the likes of Brandt, and I think both went quite well through the group. And it was from her side definitely a very good race, and you can definitely see a progression over the last couple of weeks. So there's not a word lied, I guess, in the fact that they are building towards a very strong month of December. And yeah, it looks promising. So if you can keep the line up and you can keep the progression going like it is right now, I think that's definitely something to look forward for in the Christmas period.
The rider behind her, Manon Bakker, is definitely on a similar upwards trend as well. We all know that she had the knee injury at the beginning of the season after her cross races in Germany. Has been struggling ever since, but today was a good race again. Yeah, the conditions are better for her as well. Bakker usually does better in the more rainy, cold, muddy conditions. And today, well, it was not super muddy, but there was at least the return of some mud. I expect tomorrow to be a lot more muddy. And yeah, 6th place, she was in 4th for a while, ultimately faded a bit in the final lap, but also improvements on her side, and we know that the talent on her side is there as well. Then finally, Vos, 10th place. It's not what I had expected for her. She was leading in the first lap, and I thought, oh, what's going on? Is this today Vos day, last week improvement, and this week, just before she takes a break, the form is there? But it turned out that a very rare occasion of Marianne Vos blowing up.
Indeed, a very rare occasion. I mean, I had the same kind of feeling at that first lap. I was like, well, the progression was kind of there. It looked to be going a little bit better, especially in Beekse Bergen. So I didn't find it weird that she was there at the front, and I thought that someone with that amount of experience would definitely know how to make sure that she will finish the way kind of the way you started, and make sure that you don't lose that many positions. But it was after Alvarado passed her, it was quite quickly followed by Betsema van der Heijden, and it just tumbled down, and 40 seconds became a minute became 1 minute 30, and in the end she finishes in 10th. I think it's difficult for her, and interesting to see what she can do tomorrow, because she is planning to do the double weekend, and what is actually the real reason right now behind the form that she is in right now. I mean, there should be definitely some sort of an explanation. Yeah, we knew that it was a busy road season campaign that she had, but we are already a couple of weeks in, and while there are small signs of improvement, it's not significant, and then you're wondering what's going on. But she might surprise us in the next coming weeks. I don't know.
Does there have to be an explanation though? The season is long, and we know that she's building toward the World Championships. She's probably just showing the jersey now, collecting some nice start money from it, and I don't think that is the moving needle for her, the start money, but it's just nice to show the jersey, get a rhythm in, score some points, and then once we come towards the money time in the season, the championships, I do expect she will be there. She's going on a training camp now. She probably just rolled in with pretty poor form after not doing a lot of training after the World Championships. It's fine. I think she will bounce back. Maybe she's not able to compete against this Van Empel, Pietersen, but yeah, the form, the talent, well, it can't be disappeared that rapidly based on this road season, so yeah, we'll just need to wait and see. Let's run across Europe and take a look at some other results. There was racing in France for the third round of the Coupe de France in Camor, where Gerben Kuipers took the win ahead of Timon Ruek and Lores Rouillet. On the women's side, Anne Morichon took the win ahead of Perrine Clausel and Laurine Durafou. There was a C1 race today in Slovakia and Samorin, and Victor van der Putten took the win ahead of Marek Konwa and Jakub Riemann. Kristina Zemanova won the women's race ahead of Alessia Bullieri and Katerina Hladikova. Racing in the Ardover Supercross in Ardover, Great Britain, Toby Barnes took the win racing for our own Garden Shed Verge Ribble team ahead of another rider from our team, Jensen Young. The third rider on the podium was Bjorn Koert, whilst the women's race was won by Millie Cousins ahead of Annie Last and Kate Eady. That will wrap it up for today. Tomorrow we will be back discussing the 6th round of the World Cup in Overijse. Thank you for being here, Issam.
Yes, thank you for having me. Looking forward to Overijse.
We will be back tomorrow with a new episode of the Cyclocross Social podcast, then covering the World Cup in Overijse. Thanks for listening and goodbye.